Here we are doing an analysis, trying to make sense of what was the paper like, what are the different questions, what type of questions have arrived, and how do you deal with them.
Among all those quantitative aptitude questions, in many questions he has put a trap. So you'll have some exceptions that you have to keep in mind, but while doing it, you'll just don't remember those things.
Prelims is always a game to watch. That gives you a challenge. Mains is a different challenge.
But I think this time he has changed a little bit, because in the previous years he used to ask more difficult history questions, but he has asked easy history questions.
Now that some teams have repeated one day paper is it that there is one person who set the paper and that has been compiled, or multiple papers professions repeat?
I suggest, for example, if you see the questions from sports or maybe awards a little bit, and maybe schemes and government organizations, all these every year will come from India year. You can go through.
What is the message to all those who are freshly preparing for keeping next year target? What message?
I think it is a very difficult paper only. Considering only thing is that history questions were easy, but other subject questions are difficult.
ಯಾವುದೇ ಹಳ್ಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಓದ್ತಾ ಇರೋರಿಗೂ ಈ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ನೀವು ಕಾಮನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಬರೀ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಸ್ ಉಳ್ಳವರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಈ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾನ ತೆಗೆದಾಕ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ರೈಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ that UPSC starts considering papers in English. English ಹಿಂದಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ರೀಜನಲ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೊಡೋದನ್ನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ರೈಟ್, ಬಟ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಷ್ಟಂತೂ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲ. 87 ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲ. ರೈಟ್, ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ 80+, ಇಟ್ ಲುಕ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಸೇಫ್ ಸ್ಕೋರ್. Right, so it's like an exit poll prediction as of now. Hello everybody. The 2025 prelims of UPSC has just gone by. So yesterday's paper has thrown out a lot of surprises, lot of new ideas, and as usual, UPSC has continued to keep its challenge on. It challenges the students, the preparation, the institutes who are preparing students every year. They have something new to offer every year, and each thing has an idea to put forward. Here we are doing an analysis, trying to make sense of what was the paper like, what are the different questions, what type of questions have arrived, and how do you deal with them. Many times the feeling is it's too factual, it's too understanding based, too analytical, and every time while we are analyzing, we go to the extremes. But let's put some sense into the idea. Try to understand why these questions came, and with the minimum understanding that we have, how would have we answered those questions? What are some questions you should have left gone by? How is that we deal with this paper? Prelims is always a game to watch. That gives you a challenge. Mains is a different challenge. So having understood Prelims 2025 paper, here we are with an analysis. Welcome to all of you. I have along Basuraj sir. Together we'll be working on this year's prelims paper. So to start with, we have seen the prelims paper in terms of the analysis. This is the number of questions that have come subject wise. Any starting remarks that you want to make, sir?
So similar to the previous years, so he has asked most of the questions distributed throughout the subjects, and also the current affairs questions are somewhere around 30, which is similar to 24 and 23 also. But I think this time he has changed a little bit, because in the previous years he used to ask more difficult history questions, but he has asked easy history questions. But some other subjects like maybe polity, it was more application oriented questions. Economy, he asked questions in terms of calculations or the math part, something like that. So I think he has changed his idea, and even within the subjects also he has shifted a little bit of patterns based on, he has left the topics which he used to ask, he has asked new topics like that.
So lot of such surprises as we understood. The idea we saw something like in terms of history, Buddhism question or Jainism question also must every year bande baratte no larger feeling. Similarly in terms of polity, e topic bande baratte no tara. So as you said, rightly pointed out that some traditional areas as such is gone by, is missed out. But the way he has asked questions, but one surprising thing, sir, ಸೇಮ್ ಟಾಪಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು 2-3 ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ ಬಂದಿರೋದು. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನ್ ಕೋಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಮೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಒಂದರಲ್ಲೇ 2 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫಿಸ್ಕಲ್ ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫಿಕ್ ಟು ದಟ್ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ರೆಸಿಪ್ಟ್ಸ್, ರೆವೆನ್ಯೂ ರೆಸಿಪ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮೇಲೆನೆ 3 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ ನ್ಯೂ.
Correct. Even in geography also, last on minerals topic, he asked 3 questions, different types of questions. So I think even for example time zones. So he asked continuous 2 questions on time zones. So like that, I think maybe the question paper setter might have thought, okay, I have to ask questions on these topics. Maybe he has set in such pattern.
Okay, now before getting into that direct analysis, if I have to ask a general question, which probably may be your curiosity, now that some teams have repeated, ಒಂದೇ ಪೇಪರ್ 2-3 ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದಾಗ, is it that there is one person who set the paper and that has been compiled, or multiple papers ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲವು questions ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಆ ತರ ರಿಪೀಟ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಾ?
No, I think it's mostly one maybe professor who has set the question for, let's say, geography, because that's a very rare possibility that 2 questions on time zone will come, and that took continuous questions. Okay. So I believe the same professor might have set.
But when we see questions like time zone, or for example in economics questions with respect to calculation of that idea, now these are very basic concepts. There is nothing Greek and Latin involved, athwa idikeno tumba ಕಲ್ತಿರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. Very basics involved. But student ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಇದೇನು ಅನ್ನಿಸೋದು ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So what is the message when we say, before we get into a detailed idea, when we look at the entire paper, we have spent our entire day yesterday, and with the feeling that you have spoken to many students now, what is the message to all those who are freshly preparing for keeping next year target? What message should they take?
So one thing is that, again, they have showed that, again, the previous year question themes are very important. They have been asking the same kind of patterns. For example, last time they asked a question on isotherm. This time also they have continued that topic. So like that, he has been asking. For example, in history also, Aragatta question is a repeated question. So maybe with the different options. But I think the PYQ theme is very important. So that is where you will realize that how UPSC is asking question. And along with that, I think if you see the 32 current affairs questions, so even in geography, environment, or economy, or maybe some other subjects, static part he has reduced little bit questions. For example, geography has reduced to 9, but he has asked more questions from the current affairs point of view, even in his environment also. So I believe he is giving more importance to current affairs. So I think reading the newspaper or following certain current affairs magazine is a must.
Yeah, so definitely agreeing with that, with the idea. How much ever importance that we give in terms of study, very high importance to understanding and very high importance to clarity, because the way the statement-based questions have been framed, or even history questions or polity questions, these are not direct prelims type objective questions. They are very detailed questions, so you need to know the concept in clarity. When there is complete idea about that concept, you can answer. Correct. So probably one takeaway for all the students is, yene kalitru kuda, study it in detail, have a complete idea about it. Yes. That's something that they should take away.
Correct. Concept clarity is very important, because at the end, UPSC checks your reasoning part or the logic part. So if you understand a particular concept well, then you can answer the questions. At the same time, I believe maybe next year again UPSC will come up with different patterns of questions. So I don't think so we should run behind the patterns of questions. Mostly we have to think about whatever the pattern that they might ask. I have to have a calm mindset during the exam hall, in the exam hall, to answer those questions with your right mindset. That is very important.
Perfectly. That's very well put across. The idea is, whatsoever the questions come, however they come, if we are calm and if that 2 hours we are able to manage very well with the good preparation that we have done, this paper is definitely doable. That does not mean it's extremely easy or again extremely difficult, but being very calm, handling the paper for those 2 hours is important. That's something that's repeatedly getting proven. So we'll get to the analysis, sir. Any surprises do you think in terms of total out of the box idea when you think in terms of number of questions in the areas? Specifically when I see about compared to history, geography, polity and economics, when you see number of questions in science being 11, right, as such, is that an out of the box idea?
So even science, I think he asked 6 questions from current affairs, and static part he asked 11 questions. Actually, if you see in that way, actually from current affairs point of view, usually he asks more questions from SNT, economy, environment and IR part. If you see, for example, polity questions, even though they have a connection with current affairs, but questions will be more from a static point of view. I think more or less it's about IR, economy, SNT, and environment for current affairs point of view. I believe maybe he has shifted some questions to SNT more, maybe less importance to geography, like that, and that will change every year.
Definitely.
So I don't think so. It's a big surprise. I believe, for example, some people usually, especially the first attempters or the second attempters, they leave history completely, or sometimes they neglect history, saying that it's a very factual subject.
Or sometimes science and technology also.
Also. So if you see in that way, but history this time was literally more or less like a easy part. So if you completely neglect subject, then you will miss all these 14 questions. Then you are out of the competition. So you should never neglect a subject. Even at least you should, basics you have to read.
So one clear idea is never neglect any subject in terms of complete bitbudtini and no ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ don't leave out anything. But if you have to look back again, the idea, sir, polity retains its 14 questions more applied in nature. History altogether again about 14, leaving 2, in fact around 16 questions such as. Environment as such, very important field, 7 questions, but not very direct questions.
Correct. So more or less environment subject UPSC has made in such a way that most of the questions will be application oriented questions. So if you understand the ecological principles well, then you can guess the answer in the exam hall with common sense. So environment is all about common sense. So in that way he has set the question paper.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we are doing a generic analysis. We'll take a subject specific idea much later in specific videos as such. But now coming to current affairs, sir, the number of questions when we see this number 32. Now generally there was analysis yesterday regarding current affairs questions tumba kadme agide, where probably they may say some of these are part of the traditional, but specifically why they have arrived and why that question has been framed when we say 32. So first question is for anybody who is a beginner, who is now watching, who is preparing for next year, and wants to see 32 questions of current affairs. Where should we prepare from? What is that source?
So usually current affairs, any one good newspaper that you read, most of the questions, if you or the topics that you see, has come from Hindu newspaper topics only. And apart from that, I suggest, for example, if you see the questions from sports or maybe awards a little bit, and maybe schemes and government organization, all these every year will come from India Yearbook. You can go through. So usually India Yearbook covers the current affairs at least in a short point of view. Even sports also, you have a section for sports, you have a section for defense. All those basics and the current affairs part usually comes from this. This trend was there maybe 7-8 years before, but in between they used to not ask questions from India Book, but now again they have come back to India Book. So I think good one newspaper and maybe one current affairs magazine and India Book. So these will cover the.
So India Book makes a significant presence, especially when you see questions here and questions of sports and awards. Very important point to note. Now again, specific looking, we look at some of those questions here, but when you look at government organizations, they've asked about DRI, Department of Revenue Intelligence, Enforcement Directorate, and there's one other which was not in news, but they've touched along with these two. So where do we get exact information of this? Yes, India Book gives you a very clear idea. But at that point, even after studying, the way they've asked those questions requires a lot of application of mind. In terms of they've also touched which ministry and what is their main work. So keeping this in mind, newspaper does play a very important role, because every day in and day out when there is news about ED or Enforcement Directorate, they will talk about which ministry, they will also talk about the law under which they are acting. So ED, the statement was correct when it says it is under Finance Ministry, but when they say it is with respect to an IT Act, it is not IT Act because it is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, that kind of an idea. So newspaper reading, again and again, it is reinforced the importance of regular newspaper reading, because it gives a continuity in terms of how do you maintain things as such. Now, coming down, sir, in terms of mapping, right, specific, there was a trend of important areas where we saw South China Sea or Mediterranean Sea. 2 years back when we discussed, we saw the shift was towards Africa and other countries. Last year and others, we saw Ukraine and surrounding countries and others being used. But this time there's an interesting shift. There is a history touch to the mapping that has come, because they've asked about regions. And they've also given in terms of Andes Mountains, so there is a geography-oriented mapping also that's come. So how do you see this trend? It's totally new or earlier also?
Maybe one thing is, from the mapping point of view, one again, they have asked a question on NATO. That was again because of Ukraine-Russia war. And NATO was news for many reasons also. So, and usually what happens, maybe he asks last 8 to 10 months current affairs. But if some issue was in news, maybe let's say from past 3-4 years, then that will become very important for the exam. And if you see maybe the traditional mapping, always sometimes what happens, he used to ask these kind of questions like Andes mountains ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದು ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅದರ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಂತ 1990s 2000 ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳೋರು. ಆ ಟ್ರೆಡಿಷನ್ ನ ಅಗೇನ್ he is bringing back, and again he is asking certain continents which are neglected, because we don't study about Africa, we don't study about South America, but he's asking from there. So basically all the physiographic features of different continents is important. Along with that, the countries in news or places in news, those are also important.
Wonderful. So now, having said that, once again coming back to the point. So for those who are newly preparing, for those who are looking at next year, for them, when you see this kind of mapping questions or the kind of geography questions that have come, so their idea in terms of looking at mapping cannot be a one-time exercise. The exam in few days, 1 month before the exam, I'll do everything, I'll try to by heart everything. It can't be that. It has to be a regular, continuous process.
Yes.
So how should one go about it?
So one is mapping, especially you need to see the map again and again, and you have to have a visual mental map. And again, maybe you can see through videos, visuals will help. So many, you have videos that we have made, you have many videos on YouTube also, where different contents, they'll explain the features, they explain the important countries, all that. So I think if you see the videos, then it will get better.
No, I think it was probably when I wrote, there was one time there was a question which talked about for wildlife sanctuaries, which are the rivers flowing through wildlife sanctuaries. There's one. And this time we have seen a question where which are the lakes or rivers flowing through these places as such.
Equator.
Equator. Yeah. So that kind of a question as well.
So in some ways, those lakes were in news. So in a way, he has connected the lakes which were in news and to the geographical latitude point of view.
So that's the beauty of UPSC, as we always keep telling. There is nothing fixed. There is no conditioning. Hige barate, this is how it will come. There is nothing as such. That's the understanding that we have to take about. Now, for one such thing, I don't think this kind of 3-4 years being asked has happened. There was one probably on theme, for example, International Year of Millets. And importance of millets, so that is important. With that, there will be questions. But to ask a math the following question, this is more a GK type idea. What would you
see? Again, to change the trend, especially UPSC even if you take 2024 paper also, this year paper also, he has asked certain questions which are very factual, more like a kind of a SSC exam or some other exam. But he is trying to do that to maybe remove some people from the competition, or maybe to just change the trend.
Or probably say that is one question, and if you don't know, there are other 99 we should look at that way.
Yeah.
That we need not be dependent telling how did this one question come. Again, the same thing I would apply to sports. The 2 questions on sports, one on Coco and one on chess. Chess probably was pretty direct in terms when you talk of, you should have known India's world champion Gukesh, whom he won against. At least if you know it was a Chinese player, even if not the name, that statement would have gone right. And we know Pragnananda is the youngest of India, but they asked the world's youngest.
So that is actually a little bit difficult only, because again, sports is one area where he's asking questions in the recent years. And again, I believe somewhere UPSC has a little bit of pride or ego, where he just wants to change the trend every year, so that
it establishes it.
So it brings pride to him.
Okay, so there I really have a complaint there when we see the Coco question. So to know that Coco World Cup happened is fine, but for you to expect us to remember the scores at which each one, that's something that probably, because we always keep telling UPSC is not factual, but this was pure fact. You know or you don't know.
Yeah. So again, based on the pattern or the trend that we have seen, always when UPSC gives numbers, so usually he tries to deceive you. So in that way, it will be wrong. So I usually say to my students that way, numbers, percentages, years, nouns, you have to be cautious.
Largely they are on wrong.
Yeah.
So that's how okay, interesting. The last part before we get to the CSAT idea, international organization. So pretty much mention of international organizations. We've seen NATO, we've seen BIMSTEC, we've seen ADB, right? Also BRICS in terms of the summit and details. So BRICS has made a comeback probably after 3 years in terms specific detail of BRICS. So very high importance. So generally IR is seen from mains perspective, but international organizations have a lot of role to play, including mapping international organizations. So
yes, so usually international organizations will be in news, so they'll ask from the current affairs point of view, more or less. But again, international organizations, they are more of a factual basis questions. You don't have any conceptual or reasoning based questions. So since they are factual, you have to know the years, all that, and wherever India is a member or a part of some organization, you have to know whether it is in current affairs or not.
Yeah, very much. Because when they talked about that partnership, and there was, when did India become the idea of critical minerals, the number of critical minerals and other such things, that was interesting because that was pure fact and recent current affairs.
Correct.
But when you look at BIMSTEC, founding members, and when they deceive in terms of Nepal, but the third statement has Nepal involved. These are, so again, the idea is complete clarity and idea about what to do.
Correct. And usually what happens, let's say if India is a member to, let's say, 20 organizations, different organizations in the world, all those 20 organizations will be in news in the last 1 year for some or the other reason. So it is not that, okay, you have to leave anything. So whether it is in news or it is not in news, at least basics you should know. Because for some or the other reason, every organization will be in news.
Yeah. So the message is simple. These are all questions that have been continuously in news. The topics have been in news. When you're preparing, as soon as once they come into news, get to the basic of it. When was it formed? Who are the members? Is India a member or not? What is the main objective? And why is it in news in that sense? And when it reappears, just do that value addition. So prelim specific, if you're able to prepare that amount for yourself, this will help in mains definitely later. But prelims wise, this will definitely give you. So very good preparation, continuity in preparation will help.
Yes.
So effectively, if the judgment has to be, it is in very difficult paper or very easy paper, and if you have to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very difficult and 1 being very easy, where would we see the number?
So I think it is more or less similar to 2023 pattern of question paper. So I think it is a very difficult paper only. Considering only thing is that history questions were easy, but other subject questions are difficult. So I believe it's maybe somewhere around 4.5, I guess.
4.5. That's now. There's two interesting things I'll note here. When you say 4.5, it's very much on the difficult side.
Yes, yes.
And when you make a comparison to 2023, the audience will go back. We know the cutoff of 2023 was 75 around.
Yes.
Which means, are you suggesting the cutoffs will go beyond 80?
No, I don't think so. It will go beyond 80. It should be around 80, around 80 or below 80. So that is my idea, because I've spoken to many students from yesterday. Some students are scoring well, but this time the issue is CSAT. CSAT paper is very difficult compared to 24. Definitely it is difficult. Maybe you can compare to 2023 CSAT paper. That's why 2023 cutoff went till 75. So this time also, even though reading comprehension questions were easy, but even the remaining LR, logical reasoning and quant part questions, if you want to answer, then you have to put lot of time in the exam hall. So it is very difficult to even reach up to that 70-80 marks. So many students are getting maybe in the range of 60s, 70s, 80s. CSAT. So in that way, I consider difficult CSAT paper will bring down the cutoff of maybe CSE 2025.
Very interesting remarks to close with the GS paper. So the expectation is it will come below 80, but we'll still stick our neck out to say that, and probably 82. Anything above 80 is a very safe score in that sense.
Yes, definitely. Anything, I think, see, again,
with CSAT being comfortable.
Above 80, I think anyone who clears CSAT and your score is above 70, 75, you have a chance.
So above 75, you should start preparation, but above 80 is very safe.
Yes.
That's the idea.
Yes.
That you have. Okay. So, right, for all those who have looked at and probably felt a little difficult tomorrow, there should be a lot of ray of hope, right? Considering we have taken a larger picture, right? Let's understand that. Let's come now to CSAT as such, because that's again a very important part. something that has been defining, even though it's become a qualifying paper for the sake of becoming a qualifying paper. We talked about UPSC's ego, and that's something that I've been repeatedly working on. I've made it qualifying, but now attempt. That's how I think that when you see this trend, it's largely a trend that they've followed. 30 questions around in comprehension, 30 to 25 to 30 around, and they've mixed around here.
Yeah.
What we are missing comfortably from past few years are questions on data interpretation and data sufficiency. There are no questions at all.
Yeah.
Right. And image picture-based questions have disappeared,
Yes.
considering the physically disabled students, the visually impaired students need to be given, that have disappeared. So this trend, what do you have to say?
So one thing is he has increased maybe around 3 questions in reading comprehension. Otherwise, he has maintained the similar pattern in the quantitative aptitude and logical reasoning. But usually most of the students rely on reading comprehension to clear the CSAT. But even these logical reasoning questions in yesterday's paper were lengthy. Like you have to, you will need more time to get the answer in logical reasoning.
They're
questions.
generally lengthy, but more than
Yes. So, and he has asked different patterns of questions, like he asked different values, comparisons, all that. It will take more time because you have to use trial and error method. So usually we say a question usually you have to solve in maybe 1 to 2 minutes or maximum 3 minutes, but some questions might take 4 to 5 minutes also here. So in that way, what happens? Most of the students where they have maybe not able to do well in CSAT yesterday is because in between they have panicked, because the kind of questions they were asked, they were lengthy, they took more time to solve. In between they felt that okay, there is a time crunch, I'm lagging behind, all that. So if people have maintained calm mindset even during all such situations, they have done well. So if you see even quantitative aptitude also, among the 31 questions, he asked more than 20 questions from number system chapter itself. So basically, number systems is just one chapter in quantitative part, but he asked 20 questions on that. And there also, see, since there are some questions which you can answer from the mathematical theorems, like you have direct theorems where you can use, but all students will not know such theorems. We usually say, okay, Riemann theorem we know, disjuntive theorems we know, but other things which you don't study, they have asked questions from that. But students who don't know all such theorems, you have to answer from the trial and error method. You have to put different possibilities and then you have to keep. And also, among all those quantitative aptitude questions, in many questions he has put a trap. So you'll have some exceptions that you have to keep in mind, but while doing it, you'll just don't remember those things. So he has many traps that are set in the quantitative aptitude questions. So in that way, even if you attempt, you think that I have got the right answer, but when you check the answer, it will be a different answer. So all that has happened. So in that way, even see, let's say out of 30 questions, if everyone, like let's say someone who has attempted all the 30 questions of RC, but anywhere the correct answer will not go beyond 20-25, even if you are an English professor also, I believe.
Okay.
Because there is subjectivity.
That's there.
There is subjectivity. But to get 67 marks, at least you have to answer another 10 to 12 right answers. So among,
which you feel is difficult when you
yes,
look at this 50 questions.
yes,
Out of 50, 10 to 12 will be difficult.
Yes. Why is because you will not know which one is easy for you to pick the question. Okay. So for example, let's say you are comfortable with clock or calendar question or blood relations. Let's say you see that okay, this is a blood relation question. You try solving it, but it is lengthy. It will take time, and there are some traps involved. So you feel that I have done it by taking time, but that may not be the right answer. So even maybe out of 50 questions, getting 10 to 12 right is a challenge, because I've seen that is a major problem this time, because out of 50 questions you have to choose.
With the larger audience that we have spoken to from yesterday, that's what you have been gathering.
Yes.
Out of this 50 questions, getting 10 to 12, 13 right also has been an issue.
Yes.
Among students.
Yes.
So when we teach, it's a different idea, but on those 2 hours to sit down there and in that exam atmosphere, so even if there are 20 out of 50 questions, getting 10 to 12 is becoming difficult. Very interesting. Now, having said that, sir, first, before summarizing the entire paper, in that case, what should be the strategy for CSAT, preparation-wise?
So preparation-wise, again, you have to go back to the, in the recent years, if you see the themes, number systems is a very important chapter. And let's say if you see permutation combination, he has not asked this time, but again, next year he might ask. But my suggestion would be you have to have at least a basic conceptual clarity in each topic and practice. Math is always something, if you lose a touch of it, then it will completely deceive you. You have to be in consistently touch with CSAT at least maybe 2 to 3 months before the prelims.
Okay. So having said that, some questions which I'll ask you like a commoner. Now in GS we generally say don't leave any part, do your basics from every part. You should know something, easy questions that we should attempt. But CSAT, I myself have gone ahead and told students that if you want to leave A or B topic, say permutations, combinations, you're not comfortable, skip it. Probability statistics, you're not comfortable, skip it. Do the rest of them very well. Can I afford to do that?
Yes, you can do based on, for example, let's say you have 10 questions on permutation combination chapter. Let's say 1 year they've asked 10 questions. Might be because, for example, 2023 he has asked more than 8 to 10 questions from permutation and probability. So, but if you can leave that question, because I'm saying at the end you need these number of right answers among 50 questions. Let's say you are leaving 10 questions, 40 questions you have to answer, but you have to have the clarity that among those 40 questions, which are easy for me, which are difficult for me, which are time taking, which I cannot understand, all that you have to do that in maybe 1 hour 15 minutes, because 45 minutes you will take for reading comprehension. Remaining 1 hour 15 minutes you will have the time, that means 75 minutes you have to get, okay, which is easy for me, which I can get the answer. So that skill set is very important.
Okay, so if you're leaving some topics, that's at the risk that you have done others very well, manage your time very well. Okay, now before I come to the final question here, which is probably a very general question that we want to discuss, for another student, when you said we are now discussing a scenario where they are comfortable with this and they are attempting 24, 25, they're getting right, and here they are struggling. Another student who feels comprehension is difficult for him, English is difficult for him, and he largely would want to rely here and hear whatever best possible. Then the scenario becomes very difficult.
Very difficult. So in that way, logical reasoning might help you, because you have to prioritize this first, because that will be not based on numbers or calculations. That is mostly based on the reasoning part, like how you think. So this topic you have to prioritize first. Then you can choose the easy topics from the quantitative part.
Interesting. ಈಗ ಇದನ್ನ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೇ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಕನ್ಸಿಡರಿಂಗ್ ಒಂದು ಲಾರ್ಜರ್ ಕನ್ನಡ ಕ್ರೌಡ್ಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ. Now, I have this question in terms of GS paper also. GS paper ಬಂದಿರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲೂ and CSAT paper ಬಂದಿರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲೂ. ನಾನೊಬ್ಬ ಕನ್ನಡ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್, ಕನ್ನಡ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮದಲ್ಲೇ ಓದಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಈಗ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ಸ್ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಾನು ಮೇನ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಬರೆಯೋಕೆ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷಲ್ಲೂ ಬರೀತೀನಿ, ಬಟ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ವೈಸ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಪರ್ಫೆಕ್ಟ್. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಿದ್ದಾಗ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ CSAT ಇಸ್ ಪ್ರಿಟಿ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್. ನನಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಕಾಂಪ್ರಿಹೆನ್ಷನ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಸೊ ನಾನು ಇದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕಬೇಕು, ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ the way the language has framed in terms of GS questions, I think there are at least 5 or 6 questions that if you are not able to understand the language, English and correct ಆಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆನ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. This being the scenario, is UPSC playing equal that ಹಳ್ಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ? ನಾಟ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಅಂದಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ನಾರ್ತ್ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ಸ್ಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದು ತೊಂದರೆ ಇದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹಿಂದಿ ಪೇಪರ್ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಸದರ್ನ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಥವಾ ಹಿಂದಿ ಎರಡೂ ಕಂಫರ್ಟಬಲ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋರಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋರಿಗೆ, ಕಾಂಪ್ರಿಹೆನ್ಷನ್ ಸಾಲ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ, ದೋ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಫೈಂಗ್, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ತರ? ನಮಗೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಬಿಜಾಪುರ, ರಾಯಚೂರು, ಗುಲ್ಬರ್ಗ ಅಥವಾ ಮಂಡ್ಯ ಈ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಬಂದವರು ಕನ್ನಡ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓದಿದೀನಿ, ನನಗೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಷ್ಟಾಗಿ ಕಂಫರ್ಟಬಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋರಿಗೆ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಮೆಸೇಜ್?
One thing is, as of now, anyway, UPSC gives question paper in English and Hindi, but I think as a constitutional body, UPSC should also think that it should be inclusive enough, because we have scheduled languages, whatever the languages that we have. I think question paper should be set in all the languages, considering that, okay, you can give in the prelims application itself that I want question paper in Kannada and English, like that. So they can print accordingly the person who wants that kind of paper. Because I believe English is not our mother tongue, not the mother tongue of even India also. So we have to consider, I agree that we have to connect to the world with English, but at the same time, we have to connect to our inner self with our mother tongue only. So if we want to maybe promote our diversity, I think they need to be more inclusive. So they should include all the at least scheduled languages also in terms of question paper setting. So that will help in a big way to attract or to promote the rural talent also.
So we are definitely opening a big Pandora's box. I know this may not be a very clear discussion, but we are definitely believing this is probably the start point, because ಬ್ಯಾಂಕಿಂಗ್ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಇದು ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ನಡೆದು ಕೊನೆಗೆ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕಿಂಗ್ ಪೇಪರ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, SSC ಪೇಪರ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಬಟ್ ದೇರ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಅ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ವೇರ್ UPSC ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನ ಬರೀ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಹಿಂದಿ ಎರಡರಲ್ಲೇ ಕೊಡದೆ ಯಾವ ಶೆಡ್ಯೂಲ್ಡ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜಸ್ ಇವೆ ಆ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೊಡೋ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅಂಡ್ ವಿ ಅಗ್ರಿ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್. ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಷನ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಅ ಹ್ಯೂಜ್ ಚಾಲೆಂಜ್, ಬಟ್ if not a constitutional body like UPSC which can take up the challenge, then nobody else.
Correct.
So this probably is the point that if you want to be inclusive, that ಯಾವುದೇ ಹಳ್ಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಓದ್ತಾ ಇರೋರ್ಗೂ ಈ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ನ ನೀವು ಕಾಮನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಬರೀ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ಸ್ ಉಳ್ಳವರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಈ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾನ ತೆಗೆದಾಕ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದಾದ್ರೆ, ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ರೈಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ that UPSC starts considering papers in English. ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಹಿಂದಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ರೀಜನಲ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೊಡೋದನ್ನ ಅವ್ರು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಕನ್ಸಿಡರಿಂಗ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ವೇ ದ ಬಯಸ್ ದಟ್ ಕಮ್ಸ್ ಇನ್, CSAT ಪೇಪರ್ ಅಂತೂ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇದೆ, ಬಟ್ the way the questions have been framed, right? I will come to that question specifically, but the way the questions has been framed. So that's something that we take away. Any closing comments, sir, when you look at it? And for somebody who is preparing totally afresh, that na next social prelims prepare ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಈ ತರ ಪೇಪರ್ ಬಂದಿದೆ, ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಓಡಾಡಿದೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ಈ ತರ ಅಂದ್ರು ಆ ತರ ಅಂದ್ರು, ಭಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ, ನಾನು ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಾ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಈ ತರ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಕೈಲಿ ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಆಗತ್ತಾ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತಾ ಇರೋರಿಗೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಇಷ್ಟೇ ತಾನೇ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತಾ ಇರೋರು, ವಾಟ್ ವುಡ್ ಬಿ ದಿ ಮೆಸೇಜ್?
So if you see whatever that you study for prelims, maybe you will, out of 100 questions, you will know only 20 questions, maximum 15 to 20 questions that you will have answer, like 100% this is the answer. But remaining 70-80 questions, you will not know the answer. Maybe you have to answer through your wisdom or common sense or by logic, by understanding the demand of the question in the exam hall itself. For that, the basic thing is that you have to be with yourself. That means you have to have a very calm mindset to think about the question from the neutral point of view without any prejudices. So I think if you have that mindset, or if you build that mindset, then it will be very helpful for you in the coming years of prelims. Otherwise you will feel that, see, because we always study from the school method of point of view, that okay, we study a book, question comes from there. So you in UPSC 80% of the questions will not come from what you study. So you have to have that mindset, how you can get the answer. So that is very important.
Right. So with that, when you're preparing, along with preparation, taking a lot of tests are important. We emphasize on test series, we emphasize on a lot of practice tests. But ಈ ತರ ಪೇಪರ್ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಯಾವ ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಈ ತರ ಯಾವ್ದು ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಬರೆಯೋದು ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡೋದು ಕೂಡ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ವಿ ಶುಡ್ ಎಂಫಸೈಸ್ ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ದಿ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವೆಶನ್, ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಅ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಸ್. ಅಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ರಿಪೀಟೆಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಸ್, ನೀವು ಒಂದು 4 ಅಥವಾ 100 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಆ 100 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ 1, 2, 10 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಈಸಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ದಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ ಇಸ್ ಎನ್ ಐಡಿಯಾ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಯೋರ್ ಟೇಕ್?
Yeah, so usually I said now, so the mindset that you build is based on the continuous test writing or the mock test that you give, because that will help you to build a subconscious mind wherever, even if the exam hall condition might be different, but you feel that okay, you are calm, you are confident in the exam hall. So that is where mock test will help you.
Yeah. So that's the analysis of this year's paper, both GS and CSAT. We'll do exclusive analysis of each topic wise as such, but we'll now get to larger analysis on the type of questions that have come, and a basic idea probably on the themes that have touched by. That's something that we'll get to. But this is in large how UPSC Prelims 2025 has panned out to be. And Basavaraj sir has touched on an idea that cutoffs may go below 80 like 2 years back, 2023, but you're still stucking a neck around, right? But last time ashtantu hogala, 87 definitely hogala, right? So if you're 80 plus, it looks like a very safe score, right? So it's like an exit poll prediction as of now. So all of you need to start preparing if you're looking at 80 plus. 75 plus looks safe also. So those who are 75 plus, start preparation. It's important. That's where we close. Let's take up the question paper in the second part of the discussion.